We are here with Ambassador Ryan Crocker, Dean of the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University, who's visiting the BYU campus today. Ambassador Crocker, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Fred. Thank you.
We're happy to have you. We deeply appreciate your service to the country and your many ambassadorial positions. The Middle East today is as complicated, or perhaps more so, than any time in the last 100 years. Do I understand that to be your perspective?
Not only complicated, Fred, it is descended into a level of chaos that we haven't seen in the 100 years of its modern history. It is a tumultuous region. It always has been a tumultuous region, but never to this level.
The United States has been involved more kinetically in the last 10 to 15 years, meaning military intervention, perhaps more so in that fashion than diplomatically compared with the years before. How would you sum up the success or lack of success of the United States efforts in the region in the last 10 to 15 years?
Well, one would have to break it into segments. Clearly the 2003 invasion of Iraq set in motion a series of consequences that nearly tore the country apart. But then the surge of troops that began in early 2007 had, by 2008, largely stabilized the situation, not through military force, but through the use of the U.S. military to provide a modicum of stability and security for the country that allowed decision makers to make some political compromises that had Kurds, Shia, and Sunnis, the three main communities of Iraq, all cooperating together. So from the chaos of 03, 04 through 06, we actually got to a pretty good place. But then we decided we weren't going to be there anymore. Withdrew our troops in 2011, and the space we once occupied is now occupied by Iran, its client militias, and to the west, Islamic State. So we kind of messed things up going in, and we messed things up going out.
I appreciate that perspective. Let me see if I can take that model that you just outlined and apply it a little bit elsewhere. We see a lot of military involvement, military action against ISIS, or Daesh, as the Arabs prefer to refer to it. But is there realistically a chance militarily to deal with the threat that Daesh poses? Or how and when might politics and other influences be brought to bear?
In my view, military action might set the terms that will allow a political solution to develop. That's the most military action can do. There is no purely military solution to Islamic State. There simply isn't. We have got to go after the politics that led to the rise of Islamic State, particularly in Iraq. They grew in the crevices that developed between the Iraqi Sunni community and the Shia political ascendancy. And the only way they're going to be eliminated is to fill in those crevices, which have now become canyons, and that can only be done politically. And it will take a huge effort that, once again, will have to be led by the U.S. The Iraqis, for a lot of reasons, cannot come to compromises on their own. But what I learned when I was there, that if we're in the middle of it, we can get something from one party, go to the other party and said, I think I can get you this, but I'm going to need you to give me that. And we would be the essential man in the middle, brokering these deals. If there is to be any hope of an end to the era of Daesh, we're going to have to play that kind of role again, and it will be infinitely harder now.
People who have followed your career are aware that one substantial part of your work, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, has been interfacing at interesting times and for interesting purposes with the Iranian government, with the Iranian regime. Do you have a perspective on where that relationship between the U.S. and Iran now stands? I guess you can talk of a relationship perhaps now that we have something in the form of a nuclear agreement. Any comment that you might make about that?
I began my career as a 23-year-old vice consul in Iran. That was the first foreign language I studied. I have great appreciation for Iranian culture, its incredibly rich history, and a great fondness for the Iranian people. That said, we have not exactly reached the new dawn in our bilateral relationship. I compare the Iranian nuclear agreement to some of the arms control agreements that we achieved with the Soviet Union during the Reagan years. SALT and START, for example. These were pretty good arms control agreements, made the world safer. I think the Iranian nuclear agreement is a pretty good agreement, makes the world safer. But that's what they are, arms control agreements. They're not treaties of friendship. We continue to label the Soviet Union the evil empire as we negotiated and signed agreements with them. Well, that is how we should posture ourselves vis-a-vis Iran. Their actions in Iraq, as I mentioned, in Syria, where they're propping up the most vicious regime since Pol Pot, in Yemen to a degree. The Iranians are pushing hard in ways that are diametrically opposed to our interests. We need to push back, just as we pushed back against the Soviets while we negotiated agreements with them. Unfortunately, we're not pushing back, and our friends in the region are now asking themselves, have the Americans just climbed into bed with the Iranians? And are the Americans now part of this axis of evil, to coin a phrase, that is Tehran, Damascus, Moscow, and they're asking themselves, is it now Washington? So we need to make clear to our friends and to our Iranian adversary that we're all for an agreement that takes the nuclear weapon off the Iranian table, but boy, we're going to push real hard everywhere else they're making trouble.
And when you say pushback, I sense that you're not talking about a military action. Again, the pushback we did vis-a-vis the Soviet Union was diplomatic, tough language, leverage where we could find it. You're not necessarily talking about military action.
Absolutely not, Fred. This is not a time when direct U.S. military action in the form, particularly of ground forces, is going to do any good at all. It'll only make bad situations worse.
We're early on in an interesting U.S. presidential campaign. Foreign policy usually doesn't get very sophisticated or nuanced treatment during a presidential election year.
No, you shock me.
But here's an opportunity for you to say, what would you tell a presidential candidate he or she ought to say about the Middle East and U.S. policy there, and what will need to be done in the next 4 years?
That the Middle East is a strategic region. It is a vital national security interest of the United States, what happens in the Middle East, and that the next president is going to be significantly engaged in the Middle East for the duration of that presidency. We tend to swing to extremes. Too much engaged in the region, particularly militarily, in the Bush years. Now I would argue far too little engaged in the Obama years. Neither is good.
Far too little engaged militarily or politically?
Politically. Politically. This is a time not to send in the 82nd Airborne. It's a time to send in the Secretary of State. Backed up with a president working the phones, as President Bush 41, after whom my school is named. And that's what he did 25 years ago in the first Gulf War. He put together the greatest international coalition since World War II to expel Saddam from Iraq. The forces were welcome, but it was the political coalition that was absolutely key, where the international community, led by the U.S., stood against a completely isolated Iraq. We need that sort of coalition building now. In a number of places around the Middle East, working with our friends in Europe, our friends in the region, and against our adversaries in both places, Russia in Europe, Iran and other radical forces in the region. So engage, lead, send in your diplomats so you won't have to send in your troops at some later stage.
Thank you very much. We are hosting Ambassador Ryan Crocker, Dean of the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M, formerly the U.S. Ambassador in 6 countries of the Middle East and recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his service to his country. I'm Fred Axelgard, Senior Fellow in International Affairs at the Wheatley Institution. We thank you for joining us.